AI today has exposed something that we've known as data engineers. If you worked in data engineer, you've known this all along, is that if your data is not trusted or if it's not governed or if it's not well understood, AI will never fix that. AI will just amplify it. And that's why I think one of the biggest challenges today are less about the infrastructure and more about like data operations. AI is part of the iceberg, but is the tip of the iceberg, and everything else lies underneath where the challenges are today.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Signals. I'm your host, Gwen Chen. My guest today has spent her whole career in data. Oana Sentanai is Director of Data Engineering at FanDuel, part of Flutter Entertainment, one of the largest online gaming operators in the world. She joined what was then a niche UK company 11 years ago and helped build the data foundations all the way to NYSE. But before all of that, she played NCAA Division I basketball in the US. And this is not the first time Oana and I have done this. About 3 years ago, the two of us worked on a Woman in Data and Analytics panel at AWS. I'm really curious to hear her thoughts on data and AI today. What does she care most about and her thoughts on the future of engineering? Oana, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to start with right where we left off on that panel. At that time, it was all about low latency query, concurrency, decoupling, compute and storage, and data sharing. So fast forward today, 3 years later, what are the new challenges AI workloads bring to data that we were not even thinking about then?
Yes, it's funny because 3 years in data feels like a generation. When back then, a lot of our conversations indeed were about building faster, more scalable platforms. We talked about processing more data, reducing latency, decoupling compute and storage. Those were absolutely the right challenges at the time. But I feel like today, conversation has shifted quite a lot. So the bottleneck, I don't think, is the platform anymore. It's actually the foundation. And from my point of view, AI today has exposed something that we've known as data engineers. If you worked in data engineer, you've known this all along, is that if your data is not trusted or if it's not governed or if it's not well understood, AI will never fix that. AI will just amplify it. And that's why I think one of the biggest challenges today are less about the infrastructure and more about like data operations, quality, lineage, governance, observability, and just making sure that AI can understand the context around the data. And I think AI is great. It is part of the iceberg, but it's the tip of the iceberg, and everything else lies underneath where the challenges are today.
We will dive into more questions on data later on. But for now, I just discovered you played this Division I basketball, and which meant you left your country to compete as a student athlete in the US. What was that experience like?
Oh, it was definitely the defining experience of my life. So yeah, I was 18. I was standing in an airport with 2 suitcases larger than me, almost as tall as I was, leaving Romania and moving halfway across the world. So looking back, I don't think I fully understood what it meant, but it taught me a lot. So basketball brought me there, but it really taught me so much. It taught me resilience. I was, learning a new culture. I was studying a second language. I was competing at that level and trying to build a life from scratch. So it very quickly taught me that no one's going to be solving my problems, which is one of the things I take with me into my leadership roles, is that ownership of solving my problems. So yeah, when I was in the US, I studied my computer information systems degree and later did my MBA in finance and project management. But I think one of the biggest turning points came really after a consultancy project I did, building a waste management tracking system for a manufacturing plant. And it wasn't glamorous, but it showed me something that I really believe to today, that if you're giving people the right data in the right way, they are enabled to make decisions. And really, that's the moment I fell in love with data engineering, and I've been with it ever since. And I can't believe myself, it's almost 15 years now. And from there, I moved on to Micron and was exposed to large data manufacturing data sets, and then to Flutter, where I really had the opportunity to build and scale platforms during a period of incredible growth. You mentioned Betfair. Did join Betfair, that then turned into Paddy Power Betfair, and now a giant Flutter family of brands. And so, yeah, if I look back, everything started with that decision when I was 18, but man, it was the best decision of my life. And I'm very, very grateful for everything that came after that.
Yeah. Isn't that fun? Like looking back and connect the dots, and then you realize maybe at that time it was challenging, it was hard. Finding your voice, finding your people in a new country, in a new world. But everything leads to who you are today. What do you own today as a director of data engineering?
So at the highest level, my teams own, make sure that the data is reliable, it's available, and it's useful for the business. But I joined FanDuel last year after spending a decade onto our UK and Ireland business. And today at FanDuel, as director of data engineering, I lead the data engineering function for our US iGaming vertical, covering both poker and casino. And I also own a growing suite of cross-functional data products that we call 360. These are basically designed to give our business a more connected view across all of our customers and operations, regardless of the products they use today. And beyond that, I also lead the data engineering org FanDuel in Cluj that spans a number of verticals: data engineering, platform operations, quality, and AI engineering. And so there's lots of hats I wear, but I absolutely love the job. And I think it's because it's, for me, in the role, it's no longer just about building pipelines. It's about building an entire ecosystem around it, that spans technology and process and operational excellence and people and much more than just data pipeline.
Data means different things in different companies or different industries. When you look at your past experience working in wisdom management area versus image processing versus today in gaming and even cross-functional, you mentioned that in your role. So what does data mean to you? What does data mean to your role and your company?
To be honest with you, there's one thing that spans across domains and companies, and one thing that's always been very clear to me. And in the company today and on the previous company, I think that defining characteristic of data is trust. Can you trust the numbers you're being put in front of you? Can your engineers trust the data pipelines they've built and they've released? And in the context of AI, can AI trust the context it's given? And if the answers to any of those is no, then I think the data foundation isn't as strong as you think. So to me, what data means across the board is really trust in whatever context you're working with data, either people, applications, AI now. And in the business like ours, I think every transaction has financial, it has regulatory, and it has customer implications. So good enough data isn't good enough. It has to be accurate, it has to be timely, it has to be fully auditable all the time. And you cannot really trade timeliness for accuracy or the other way around. It has to be all of that. So I think that's why I became such a strong advocate for data operations and the need for it to have a robust data foundation and data platform. Is because data should equal trust in whatever business, online business or offline business you're really. And data ops is a huge domain and spans lots of different areas like quality, lineage, observability, ownership, process. But that's been one thing I've been particularly passionate about, because I have seen the importance of this level of data operational maturity across the board. And I very much believe that companies that have invested over the past 10, 15 years in this data operational maturity are the ones who are going to win the most in this day and age with AI coming on. So, and I think that's particularly true because the reality is that AI doesn't really lower the standard for data. it actually raises it because it's so important. It's becoming extremely important to have this robust data as a foundation.
How do you make sure the data is trusted? Like, are there any best practices, especially for those companies who do not have 15 years of history working on data ops?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, I think understanding the definition of your data and having clear data owners and data stewards across the business and making data not just a technology problem, but a business problem really is extremely important. So that kind of spans into the governance area. So getting owners and definitions that are agreed across the board is extremely important. So that you have a baseline, right? You have a target and you know what your definition should be. Second of all is about the very mature operations across the board. So data quality checks, for example, at every hop of the data, at every ownership change across system, it's extremely important to ensure that data quality checks are in place from your source systems into your data ecosystem and then across the different layers of the data platform. And then outside of it, it's extremely important to make sure that monitoring and alerting is done across the board. And more complex is row counts, for example, right? You have to integrate in your quality checks, also logic checks, integrity checks, and then also upstream and downstream checks with your consumer systems and your source systems. Those are some very simple ones to implement, but I think they're key to start a good quality practicing embedded in your day to day.
Most enterprise AI pilots stop before production. In your opinion, what is the most common reason? Why is that? Is it a technical reason or organizational reason?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So most AI pilots fail. I've heard that a number of times talking to people in conferences and podcasts. I personally believe that most AI pilots do not fail because technology or the models are not good enough. I think they fail because organizations are not ready to observe them. So from what I've seen, it's rarely a model or technology problem. I think a lot of orgs can access very powerful models today, and they exist. I think the real challenge is everything around the model. And so who owns the solution once it's moved to production? How is it governed? What data can it access? How do you validate the outputs of the implementations? What is the level of risk you're willing to accept? Because AI comes with certain risks, and certain risks you should be aware of and you should be actively resolving for. And those are leadership questions, if you think about it, much more so than technology questions. And I also think there's what I've seen and in conversation I've had is there's a tendency to start with technology, especially now. AI, it's everywhere, right? And I think that's incorrect. It should, even if AI is a huge technology advancement and it's a groundbreaking indeed, we should still resolve for a business problem, right? Because AI is moving so fast, many organizations are feeling the pressure to do something with AI. But I think the better question is, what is the problem we're trying to solve, and can AI actually solve that for us? So is that AI the best way to solve for it? Because not all initiatives need an AI fix, right? Some can be fixed cheaper and better and maybe faster sometimes without using AI, right? Using the traditional methods. So I think a proof of concept can always answer the question is, can it work? But really the productionization of these pilots is really where things are starting to fall, because production answers a completely different question. And that question is, can we trust this implementation every single day, and every single output of it, can it be used? So I think that's why a lot of pilots fail, mostly because organizationally they're not ready to implement that. And sometimes because we're not really trying to solve a problem, we're sometimes implementing a technology because there's pressure to do so.
Yeah. Like maybe 2 years ago, we talked a lot about, hey, these use cases are a good fit for analytics. Those use cases are good for machine learning technology. And you sort of touched on that as well. You said people have a tendency to start with technology. In your opinion, is it still true to say that some use cases are good for analytics, some use cases are for traditional AI, and some use cases are for Gen AI?
I think so. I think one of the questions I think we should all ask ourselves when we're thinking about AI is, what capability does AI give us that traditional software doesn't? So in my head is if the problem is deterministic and is governed by very clear set rules, software can be simpler, it can be cheaper, and actually more reliable because we've been doing that for many, many years. So if the problem we're trying to solve can be solved via the traditional means we have productionized for years and we can get an answer out very quick, we should go that route. AI, from my point of view, really shines when there's ambiguity, right? Like summarizing large volumes of information, recognizing patterns, generating first drafts like requirement drafting, or helping people navigate complexity, finding patterns, and so forth. So I think those specific areas are the ones where you're going to get the biggest return on your AI investment. In studies I've done, recently I completed a program at Cambridge on GenAI and SDLC, and actually 3 of the biggest areas where GenAI had a big output was requirements drafting, test coverage, and operations. Because of the ability of AI to crunch so many logs and so much volume, the AI used in those 3 use cases were actually the biggest, were giving incredible results to our investments. So I think there are still many problems to be solved traditional ways, and there's some that can be better solved or easier solved with AI. And I think the question is just to make sure that we differentiate that. And I think starting with that problem, business statement, instead of the technology, it usually leads to much better outcomes.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So coming back to the pilots, right? You mentioned getting the data foundation right is critical to move a pilot to production. So in your opinion, for customer-facing applications, what does data infrastructure have to guarantee?
Yeah. So a customer-facing platform, I think it has to guarantee 4 things: trust, speed, resilience, and consistency. Customers, they should not think about data platforms. They should just think about the experience they have on a day-to-day basis, right? Whether they're seeing personalized recommendation or checking their account information or interacting with something we've powered by AI on our platform, they should always assume that data is accurate and it's up to date and that is consistent. That means that the platform has to provide that, right? It has to be trustworthy. It has to be quick. It has to be, especially in today's day and age, it has to be resilient and it has to be consistent. So I think, especially for a customer facing application, the data platform behind the scenes and the implementation it absolutely has to have that all the time, and not most of the time, every single time. And I always joke, but I think the best compliment we can get as a data engineering team is to nobody to notice us, because that means that we've done our job right. And the data's out there exactly how it should be, when it should be.
Yes, couldn't agree more. You mentioned earlier, like what are the risks to accept, like risk tolerate rate, right? How do you define that?
So I'll give you an example. There's always a risk of PII, accessibility of your AI agents. If you think about an AI implementation, right? You are potentially exposing your most important data and your data as an asset to AI and to agents, and there's a risk there, right? If you have a fully fledged, governed, spotless implementation, I still think you have some risk. You will need to either mitigate for or accept. Right? That's one example. That's probably the biggest one, or one of the most important ones. But latency is another risk. So if you use AI features in a customer-facing platform, the latency of the response as of today, it's not where it would be without it, right? It takes a longer time for your AI model to run and get you an answer than without it, right? So there is a risk of latency not being where it should be in a customer-facing platform or result. I think another one that you should think about is the hallucinations that I think a lot of us know about, which is GenAI producing absolutely incorrect information. Another example of it would be context blindness, right? So GenAI will not have knowledge of your code base. It won't have knowledge of your business, of your architecture, of your decision, unless you specifically integrate the two or you explicitly inject it into the model. And there's other ones, but another one we should be aware of, this is less technical, I'd say, is skill erosion for our engineers or junior over reliance. So if you think about it, these AI tools are available, and there is something we should be solving for as management, right, at the management layer, is that either junior over reliance or our skill erosion for our seniors, because those are also risks of adopting AI, and those are some more softer ones, let's say, from the bunch.
Can you talk more about skill erosion? What do you mean by that?
Yes, think about a senior that is heavily using skills that they built or we've made available to them, and are starting to rely on AI output a bit too much, right? Think about a senior that hasn't touched the line of code in years, right? Or an agent that allows you to translate code from one technology to the other, right? If you haven't worked on a certain platform and your company is migrating to this new platform, and you're fully using AI agents to help you generate code, right, to help you rewrite that code base, which can be very powerful, you're probably not going to be at the same skill level you were at on the previous platform, on the new one. You have not invested the time to actually write that code or translate that code into best practices on the new platform. So that'd be some examples of skill erosion we should consider when we implement AI.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. So a lot of managers are actually like deciding to leave their jobs and then work as ICs. I'm curious about your thoughts on this. Like, is that something you consider, and how do you make sure you don't have skill erosion yourself?
Yeah, I don't consider moving back to an IC role, I'll be honest with you, because I think I built a curriculum of skills in engineering leadership that is still valuable and will be valuable in years to come in different ways, for sure. I still love technology though, and I just mentioned the Gen AI SDLC course. I try to stay sharp with the newest technology because I think in order to have accurate and informed conversations with the ICs you're really managing and architects, and ensuring that we implement the best, I keep up with technologies as much as I can. So I do it a lot of times in my own time. When I wanted to experience with certain code lines, I open up that at 9 p.m. at night. So I try to stay on top of it, but I don't necessarily want or think I would move to an IC role unless it's absolutely necessary. But I think I have a lot more to offer with a combination of skills in engineering management. But I think it is super important to understand how it works behind the scene, the architecture level, sometimes to even write a couple of lines of code to refresh and keep track on that.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So switching gears to leading a team in the era of AI. So right now everything is speeding up, and then there's a pressure to move faster with AI. How do you keep your team focused?
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. So technology has always evolved quickly. Luckily, we're in data engineering where platforms have evolved incredibly over the past 10, 15 years. I think about 2015, we had like 100 and 200 data technologies out there. And if you count them now, we're over 2,500 data technologies. So luckily, if you've been a data engineering for long enough, you are used to the constant shift in data technologies and technology as a whole. I actually don't think our role is to slow things down. It's really to help teams distinguish between what's noise and what's genuinely worth investing in. So one thing I've learned is that, over the years, is that being adaptable and adaptability is probably the most important quality. And I look for that in engineers, because tools will change and platforms will change. AI will certainly change. But I think curiosity, learning agility, strong engineering fundamentals are always going to allow people to keep growing with the platforms and evolving throughout their careers. So one thing is I try to recruit people that are adaptable, and I look for that into engineers. And the second one is we invest heavily in AI literacy. So we encourage teams to experiment with new tools. We're lucky that we have a lot of tools available to us to experiment with and help us. But we do that with thoughtful prioritization. We don't just jump on every single AI model out there to see, how non-deterministic is one versus the other and what results we get. But we adopt AI because we generally think it should solve problems, and this is what I encourage my engineers to do. Is it genuinely going to help us solve better, faster, or safer? And if so, okay, let's jump on it. If we're not sure yet, then maybe we should be a bit more cautious. And I always often tell my teams that our goal is not to keep up with every single headline out there. Right? It's to build capability, to adapt, and because I think adaptability and capability to adapt will still be fashionable 5 years from now when tools change, the models change, and so on. So I think just trying to eliminate the noise and think about what are the important things we should be investing in AI wise is extremely important.
So, building on that adaptability, what advice do you have for the young professionals who specialize in software engineering or data roles and they are trying to find a job or internship?
The first advice I'd have is don't be intimidated by AI. I think every generation of engineers has experienced a technology shift that at the time felt disruptive. Today, it's AI, right? 5 years from now, it may be something else. When I started, I did not know what business intelligence was. And I was very intimidated with what it was because there was nothing I had met before. And over the years, there's always been something new. Today, it's AI. I think the people who thrive are the ones who do not resist change. And they're the ones who like to learn how to use new technologies and they become better at it. So what I can tell youngsters or young professionals is that in my career, I've hired a lot of very seasoned seniors, but I've also hired a lot of juniors and a lot of graduates. And the people who stood out the most were not the ones that had the longest list of programming languages or the longer list of AI technologies that they used. They were actually the ones who were curious, who asked thoughtful questions, who showed ownership, who were genuinely interested in learning. Like the young professional or graduate that was spinning up their own clusters of something and playing around with R on Coursera were significantly more appealing as new hires and someone that had a laundry list of programming language. So I'd say my advice would be build strong fundamentals, stay curious genuinely, and don't wait for someone to tell you what to learn next. But make sure you learn AI because I think Scott Galloway said it in a podcast that AI won't steal your job. People who know how to use AI will. So I think that should be something that should resonate in the back of your head.
Yeah. I ask all of my guests the future of your craft. What is the future for software engineering?
Yeah, I'm a very optimist person, and I don't think the future of software engineering or data engineering will be fewer engineers. I just really think that it's going to be different engineers because AI is already changing the way we write code, we test, we troubleshoot, right? We write requirements. I think it will continue to automate many of the repetitive tasks we're doing in data engineering and engineering in general. And that's actually because it allows us to spend more time on higher value work. So I think data engineering will evolve, will need higher and different skills than we currently have. Right? I think an engineer will evolve from being primarily a coder to actually being a systems thinker. So it's not no longer just a person that knows how to write a certain programming language or DevOps or release management or whatever the case may be, but it's someone that understands the technology side of things, the business side of things, and increasingly how to do that with AI in the equation. So I think the biggest one is, advice to youngsters, since you were asking me earlier, is don't just learn how to write code, learn how to solve problems, because, I think that's where our craft will evolve into in us being more problem solver than code writers in the
Yeah, so fundamentals, right? At the end of the day, all of the tools or software's applications, those are ways for you to solve problems. Those are like the means, not your goal, right?
Absolutely. So I think the engineer of the future, they won't be defined by how much code they write, like, oh, I wrote 10,000 lines of code. They'll actually be spotted, the good ones will be spotted based on the quality of the problems they've solved. So how they've done that be a writing code or being AI assisted in some way. That's exactly what you said. The means of doing that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, okay, two final questions. Thank you so much for answering all of my questions and some of the more spontaneous questions.
Okay.
Thanks for taking that challenge. Um, so the first one, is there a tool or a podcast or product or app in the data world you've been especially enjoying lately?
So I did briefly mention earlier about this program that I just finished in at Cambridge. I think if anyone is looking for something that's grounded in peer review, empirical research, and I'm biased because I did teach at the university setting at some point in my life, so I'm biased towards those courses. I want to recommend this Gen AI and SDLC program at Cambridge University online. It's extremely valuable. Hard to do, but very valuable, and I absolutely recommend it. And I think just because there's been so much talk about AI and jobs and how skills should evolve, I've listened to Scott Galloway that I think I referenced a quote from him at the on the Diary of a CEO, and I really enjoyed his talks. You should search for him. He talks about how the real opportunity is not competing with AI and it's learning how to work alongside it. And I think the perspective he has and the data he brings, and I am a data person, so I do like facts and figures. And it was refreshing to see some of the figures that he brought into the conversation. I can't quote them right now, but I would encourage folks to look at it. And I also received a book from one of my coworkers a long time ago. We no longer work together. The Values of AI, Edosa Odaro. I recommend it. I haven't read it yet, but I have it sitting right here on my desk. I think it's a good read. I've seen a lot of positive reviews because it's not just about technology. It's about aligning AI with human values, which I think is going to be extremely important because people with AI integrated too is extremely important and very timely.
Mhm. Thanks for that. I haven't read that book. I will check it out. My last one. What is a life or work motto you come back to often?
Yeah, there's actually a lot. I think just coming from a sports background or athletic background, there's always mottos. You kind of self-motivate before a game or before something big. But I think I did think about what would be one of them. Like, and I think the big one is for me ownership. I think it's because, when I kind of alluded to it in one of my earlier answers, leaving Romania at 18 or leading huge transformation programs like data engineering or data operations programs or building teams. I've actually learned that progress starts at the moment you stop waiting for someone else to solve the problems and you take real ownership of it. And there's a quote from Winston Churchill, the price of greatness is responsibility. And I love that because it reminds me that leadership isn't just about authority, it's about accountability. So, and I think that's probably one of the things I bring in my day-to-day work. And I hope the people that I lead also carry that with them because I think technology will always change, right? AI will change, we will evolve, but ownership will never go out of style from my point of view. And so I'd say one of the leadership principles I use with my kids at work, in my athletic career, everywhere is the concept of ownership.
I love that. Wow. I'm going to steal that quote. The price of greatness is responsibility. Yeah. So, like a lot of people are saying that you can use AI to vibe code and write code so faster. You can create copy so fast, but AI doesn't have responsibility. So sometimes the quality is hard to control. I think that's especially relevant to today.
100%. I think ownership becomes even more important now with AI because you still need a human in the loop to be accountable for decision we make or outputs of our AI integrated systems or whatever. So yeah, I'd say it's very applicable, very personal to me, but I think ownership is my key at least.
Yeah. I have a final one, if you're
Yeah,
okay, Anna. Yeah, I heard somebody said the best way to teach a girl to be a leader is to put them on team sports. What do you think?
100%. 100%. It teaches you a lot. It teaches you resilience from a very early age because usually, sports are played from early ages. But I can absolutely attest to it. A lot of the way I lead today has been influenced a lot by because I was part of the sports team. And you don't even need to go, become like high performance or to be at the senior level or play a Division 1 basketball. I think just being on a sports team is absolutely fundamental. And I think there's been some research that has actually been linked to sports. So I think it was something like, and I don't want to misquote it, but it was like there's 98% chance that a girl on a sports team will have some sort of a leadership role in a community, in an organization, at work. And so I think it's mind blowing. The number was mind blowing. So yeah, female leadership is one thing I support the most. And even more so since I have a little girl at home, sports is a huge, huge enabler for female leadership across the board.
All right. Well, it was a fun conversation. I learned so much from you, Oana, on life, on work, on data. Thank you for talking with me again after 3 years.
Thank you, Gwen. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's an absolute honor to be invited on your podcast. And congrats on the journey you've been on. It's fantastic to see it, and thank you so much for having me.
For everyone else who's listening, if you like this podcast, share it with one data or AI leader in your network. See you next time.
Thank you.